If you're learning English or really any second language, you have probably hit that wall.
Oh yeah, the wall.
You've done the work. You've studied the verb conjugations. You've gone through the grammar textbook. You've got maybe 5,000 words of vocabulary memorized.
You feel like you should be ready.
Exactly. But then the second a native speaker starts talking at a normal conversational speed, all of that knowledge just,
It melts away.
it transforms. Our sources describe it as sounding fast, blurry, or confusing. It's this auditory disconnect that just leads so many people to the same frustrating thought.
Maybe my ears are just broken.
Yeah, maybe my ears just aren't good enough.
And that right there, that is the single biggest psychological hurdle we need to get over right from the start. Your ears are not broken.
Okay, that's a relief.
The confusion you're feeling is, it's a completely normal symptom of training the reading brain without really training the listening brain.
So they're two different things.
They're two totally different skills. I mean, listening isn't passive. It's an incredibly complex, high-speed processing skill. And like any skill, it gets better when you train it the right way.
And that is our mission today. We are going to do a deep dive into a really practical, step-by-step framework for how to do that. We've extracted these methods from experts on listening mastery, and we're targeting exactly how you train that skill.
Right. We're moving past that generic advice, the just watch more movies line.
Yeah, that's not helpful.
It's not. We're going to give you 7 highly effective strategies that are designed to take you from feeling completely lost to, confidently understanding fast, complex conversations.
So what's the core idea here that's driving this whole deep dive?
The core thesis is a critical perspective shift. If you want to get better at listening, you have to stop thinking it's just a side effect of studying grammar.
It's not osmosis.
Not at all. It is a dedicated skill set that only grows when you apply these targeted, strategic methods. So we're going to unpack these, and we'll show you not just what to do, but sort of the science of why it works. We'll be focusing heavily on things like repetition, integration, and, of course, mindset.
Perfect. We've broken this down into 4 clear segments, and we're starting right now with the absolute foundation, the mental game and the exposure game. Let's unpack this and get right into the biggest mistake most learners make. So tip number 1. This one focuses entirely on choosing your materials and really on psychology. It is. Start with what you can understand.
It sounds so simple, deceptively simple.
Right. But the failure to follow this one piece of advice is what creates that negative feedback loop that just crashes so many learners.
It really does. We've all seen it, right? The ambitious learner, they finish their first beginner course, and then they immediately try to jump into, fast-paced HBO drama or a dense political podcast.
Yeah, something with a lot of jargon and speed.
And the outcome is always the same: overwhelm, frustration, and a total shutdown.
I do get the ambition, though. I think people feel that if they struggle through something really hard, they'll learn faster. But why is that actually, counterproductive for training your ear?
It all comes down to cognitive load, and maybe even the brain's threat response.
Fair response.
Yeah, when the input is just too fast and too complex, let's say you only understand 5% of what's being said, your brain is spending 95% of its energy just trying to catch up.
Trying to match sounds to words it knows.
And it's failing constantly. Every second it's failing. That signals inefficiency. It signals a lack of progress, and that creates frustration. When that failure loop reinforces itself, the brain basically says, okay, this is too hard, shut down the attention centers.
So you literally stop learning.
You stop learning entirely. Instead of accelerating the process, you're actively sabotaging your own motivation and your own learning efficiency by pushing way too far, way too fast.
Okay, so the core concept you're talking about is what our sourcing calls sufficient understanding.
Exactly. Sufficient understanding. You don't need to get every single word. That's not the goal.
Right.
But you have to understand enough.
And how do we define enough?
Enough is being able to maintain the general flow of the conversation or the story without constantly stopping and rewinding. If you can follow the main idea, even if, say, 20% of the specific vocabulary is new to you, that material is perfect.
But if you're hitting pause every 20 seconds...
then it's too hard. If you're pausing to look up a word or decipher a phrase that often, the material is too complex. You need to scale back.
And scaling back can feel like a step backward for someone who's really ambitious. So what does that appropriate material actually look like?
You're looking for things where the speaker is consciously trying to help the learner.
Okay.
This means, slower speeds, clearer pronunciation, and usually using more common vocabulary. Think of podcasts specifically designed for beginners, or slow-spoken English news reports,
Yeah.
even kids' stories.
And this isn't about insulting your intelligence.
Not at all. It's about setting the stage for a guaranteed low-stress success. Because the psychological benefit of that success is it's
Yeah.
huge.
Right. When your brain successfully processes information, even simple information, you get that little hit of dopamine, right? It reinforces the behavior.
That reinforcement is the lubricant that makes the whole machine work. Confidence fuels persistence. If you feel like you're succeeding, even in a small way, you're so much more likely to stick with the really tough training methods we're going to talk about later. You're building up the psychological resilience you need to tackle harder stuff down the road.
Because you have a track record of success, no matter how small.
Exactly. It changes that feeling of failure into a feeling of capability. And that is the absolute prerequisite for long-term listening mastery.
Okay, so that clarity on material is crucial. Once we have the right level of content, we can move to tip number 2, which shifts the focus from these intense study sessions to something completely different.
Right. Massive, constant environmental exposure.
Yeah.
And this is a really fundamental mindset shift that separates effective listening training from how we traditionally study languages.
Okay.
The central argument here is that reading grammar books for 10 hours, it's not going to improve your ear one bit. The ear requires sound saturation.
Because the pathways in the brain for reading and for auditory processing are totally distinct.
They are.
You might look at the written word schedule and know exactly what it means, but when you hear that complex cluster of sounds from a native speaker, especially with different dialects and speeds, your auditory system might not even recognize it as the same word.
Precisely. The auditory system has to build this huge library of what are called acoustic signatures.
Yeah.
It has to map the chaotic, connected sounds of real spoken English onto the neat, separate units of vocabulary you learn.
And that just takes sheer volume.
It takes volume. Our source material uses a really powerful and sticky analogy for this. It describes the brain as acting like a sponge.
A sponge, I like that.
Yeah. The more English sound the sponge hears, the more English it just naturally absorbs.
That's a great analogy because it really gets at the power of implicit learning. It suggests that learning is happening even when we're not consciously sitting there trying to translate or analyze every word. So what exactly is the brain absorbing during this kind of background, low-stakes listening?
It's absorbing the acoustic landscape of the language, things like the prosody, the rhythm, the cadence, the patterns of stress and intonation.
So the music of the language.
The music of the language, that's a great way to put it. And that is arguably more important than specific vocabulary, at least at first. When we're listening passively, the brain isn't necessarily translating words, but it is implicitly learning where word boundaries tend to fall, where native speakers put the stress on syllables, and how phrases group together.
And this process, this implicit phonetic learning, it basically prepares your brain for when you do sit down for a focused study session.
Yes, exactly. It makes that low-stakes practice so powerful. It means you can convert what was previously dead time into linguistic training time.
Right. So what are some of the practical ways our sources recommend for doing this, for incorporating this background audio?
We're looking for those high-frequency, low-attention moments in your day. The sources are very specific about this. Listening while you're cooking, while you're walking, or on your commute.
Before you go to sleep.
Before sleeping is a great one. Or while you're traveling. The critical factor in all of this is consistency. You just want English to be flowing around you constantly, like background music.
Let's analyze the difference there. If I listen intensely for 1 hour a day, reading a transcript, analyzing every sentence, that's high intensity.
Right.
But if I listen to low-stakes background audio for 2 hours while I'm doing chores, what's the comparative benefit?
For building that automatic comprehension and reducing the shock of fast speech, the low-intensity exposure is actually superior.
Oh.
Yeah. The high-intensity study is crucial for learning meaning and applying grammar. But for the ear, the goal is just building familiarity. If your brain hears the acoustic rhythm of an English sentence 500 times in the background over a week, it starts to normalize that rhythm.
So it's not a foreign sound anymore.
Exactly. When you encounter that same rhythm later in a high-intensity session, your brain doesn't have to struggle to figure out where the words are. It just recognizes the sound envelope.
So you're training the brain to stop treating the language like this alien noise and start recognizing it as a predictable pattern, even if you're not actively translating 100% of the content.
Precisely. You're creating a massive, pre-existing framework of familiarity. Think of it like this. If you've never heard, say, French before, the first time you try to watch a French movie, your brain has no clue where one word ends and the next begins.
It's just a wall of sound.
It's a wall of sound. But if you've spent 100 hours with French music or podcasts in the background, your brain has already subconsciously mapped the typical stress patterns and phrase lengths. So the task of parsing specific words becomes significantly easier when you finally do focus.
Okay, so that establishes our foundation. You start with successful confidence-building material, and you combine that with massive, consistent environmental exposure.
That's the 1-2 punch.
Now we can move into the techniques that require a bit more active effort but deliver the biggest results. We're talking about repetition and multisensory input. So if the first two tips were about quantity and setting the mood, tip number 3 is the core training technique.
This is the real engine room.
It is. It's repetition. The source calls this the powerful secret, and it emphasizes repeating the same piece of audio multiple times. You have to resist that urge to just consume new content all the time.
And this is so counterintuitive for modern learners. I mean, we are so used to endless content feeds on everything. So why is resisting new stuff and instead forcing yourself to listen to the same 5-minute clip over and over the fastest way to improve? It sounds incredibly inefficient and frankly a little boring.
It does sound boring. We have to convince the listener that this slow learning is actually high-speed learning for the ear.
It really is. And it's all about neural pathway consolidation.
Okay, break that down for us.
When you hear a new sentence for the first time, your brain is trying to build a new connection, a new neural pathway between the sound signal it's getting and the meaning it knows.
And that connection is weak at first.
Very weak. It's like a barely visible dirt track in a forest. If you immediately move on to new content, you just start building another equally weak track somewhere else. And soon you have dozens of these weak little tracks, and none of them are strong enough to travel on quickly.
But repeating the same content 5 times, that changes the nature of that track.
Absolutely. Repetition is the act of paving that road. The second time you listen, you're deepening the path. The third time, you're laying down asphalt. By the 5th time, you've solidified a durable high-speed neural highway for that specific acoustic pattern.
You're training your brain to recognize that sound instantly, effortlessly.
Yes. And the source material details this progressive realization so well. The first time you listen, maybe you get 20% understanding. It's fractured, it's blurry.
You feel a little lost.
Yeah. But the jump is dramatic. By the 3rd time, suddenly your comprehension jumps to 40% or even higher. That massive non-linear leap, that's your brain successfully categorizing and segmenting the sounds it was struggling with at first.
So it's not just recognizing more words, it's finally hearing the boundaries between them.
Right. And by the 5th time, your brain has moved beyond just recognition to automaticity. Words and phrases that were just abstract noise before now start to sound familiar. They have solid boundaries, and you have meaning attached to them. This is the shift from struggling to parse sound to just smoothly recognizing known patterns.
This deep repetition must be addressing that blending or linking phenomenon you hear in native speech.
That is exactly what it's for. English speakers don't pronounce words one by one. We run them all together.
Right.
A learner who only listens once just hears a wash of sound. But a learner who repeats it 5 times forces the brain to isolate where I connects to am, connects to going, connects to to, connects to do.
To eventually hear, I'm gonna do.
Right. That physical linking is what trips people up, and only intense repetition over the exact same clip forces the brain to internalize that linked sound structure.
So we're really training the ear to segment and decode those reduced and connected forms of speech. That must take a lot of patience, especially when you feel stuck at that 40% mark for a while.
And this brings us back to that crucial mindset check from our source material. The phrase is, don't rush. Slow learning is still real learning.
I like that.
The anxiety often comes from comparing how fast you learn different skills. Memorizing vocabulary might feel fast. But training the ear is inherently slow because we're physically restructuring pathways in the brain.
The quality of that slow, deep work is what matters.
It's exponentially more valuable than just superficially consuming 10 new podcasts. We are seeking depth of processing here.
And the idea is that once you've paved that acoustic highway for one specific 5-minute clip, that efficiency transfers to new material that has the same sound patterns, right? You're not just learning that one clip.
Exactly. The neural pathways you build to decode I'm gonna or good heck you doing from one clip are now immediately available to decode those same common constructions in any future content you listen to.
So repetition is pattern-specific, not clip-specific.
That's it. It's the engine that powers this whole training program.
So once we've used repetition to stabilize the sound, we then integrate another sense to really cement the understanding. And that brings us to tip number 4. Tip 4 is all about finding audio that has a transcript. This is sometimes called dual input, and this is the moment where we actively confront the auditory gap.
Ah, the auditory gap.
The
Yeah.
disconnect between the sound the learner heard and the word they actually know.
And that gap is where so much frustration lives. A learner knows the phrase, "I need a cup of tea." They've seen it written 1,000 times,
Right.
but then they hear a native speaker say, "I need a cup of tea." The learner is convinced the speaker just said 3 words they had never heard before.
When really it's just phonetic reduction and assimilation.
Exactly. And the transcript acts as the explicit map. It links the known written form cup of vel to the unknown, highly reduced spoken form cuppa.
We should probably talk about the technical things that a transcript reveals. You mentioned reduction and assimilation. For a listener who really wants to do a deep dive, what are the specific phonetic phenomena that make the written and spoken words so different?
There are several, and they are basically invisible without a transcript. Vowel reduction is a massive one.
Okay.
This is when unstressed vowels turn into that very weak, lazy ugh sound. It's called a schwa. So the word for becomes fair, or to becomes ta.
Like, I'm gonna ta the store.
Precisely. Then you have assimilation. That's when a sound changes to become more like the sound next to it. That's why $10 can sometimes sound like $10, because the N sound takes on the qualities of the B that follows it.
So the transcription reveals all these weak forms that native speakers use to speed up their speech, but that learners never see on their vocabulary flashcards.
Never. If a learner never sees the written words could have right next to the spoken sound coulda, they will never learn to decode coulda. The transcript is the key that unlocks the rapid-fire connected speech that defines real-world English.
But the technique has to be done right. It's not just listening while you read.
No, absolutely not. The source outlines a very specific 3-step sequence. The order is critical.
Okay, let's nail down that sequence, because the order of operations is what gives it its analytical power.
Step 1 is listen first, always.
No peeking at the text.
No peeking. This is your diagnostic phase. You're forcing your brain to try and segment the sounds on its own. The goal is to identify your points of confusion. Just listen and give yourself a rough comprehension percentage.
Okay, so after you've listened once or twice and you know where you got lost, step 2 is then read the transcript.
Right, this is the corrective phase. This is where you consciously link the written word to the sound patterns you struggled with. This is the aha moment where you realize, oh, that sound I thought was 3 syllables was actually the word especially, and I missed it because of the stress pattern.
And this is where you should be actively looking for those phonetic reductions, highlighting the gonas and the wanas.
Exactly. See how they connected tell to him to make tell him? This conscious mapping is what fills in the auditory gaps. You are actively correcting your ear's misinterpretation of the sound wave.
And then step 3, listen again.
Listen again. This is the internalization phase, and it links right back to tip 3, repetition. You need to do this multiple times. Now that your brain knows what the sound should map to, you re-listen, and you're actively building the new, correct neural pathway for that sound combination.
You're basically overwriting the incorrect auditory data with the confirmed data.
That's a perfect way to put it. This systematic process is so powerful because it uses both your visual and your auditory memory.
And over time, your reliance on that transcript should go down.
It should diminish. The success metric isn't just understanding the meaning of the clip. It's no longer needing the visual anchor of the text. When you can listen to complex content and understand it without the text, you've built auditory automaticity. You've trained your ear to be fluent in the sound patterns of English.
That dual input, combined with dedicated repetition, seems like the real heavy intellectual work. It solves the phonetic mystery that defeats so many people.
It does.
We've moved from passive soaking to active segmentation. So now we can transition to involving the body through active vocal practice. Okay, tip number 5 brings in a motor component. Shadowing. Our sources admit that this method, which is basically speaking at the same time as the audio, sounds strange.
It sounds very strange.
But they stress that it is one of the most effective fluency tools out there.
It is, but it feels weird because we're usually taught that speaking and listening are sequential. You listen, then you speak. Shadowing requires you to do them simultaneously.
So you're not listening and then repeating.
No, you are trying to parrot the speech in real time, like an echo that's just microseconds behind the native speaker.
And the goal here is not comprehension. It's not even perfect pronunciation, which is a big relief. So what is the actual mechanism we are training when we do this?
We are training the auditory vocal loop. When we listen passively, our auditory cortex receives the sound. When we speak, our motor cortex generates the movements. Shadowing links those two directly. By forcing your vocal apparatus, your mouth, your tongue, your throat, to physically reproduce the rhythm, the stress, and the reduction patterns of the native speaker, you are leveraging motor memory to reinforce your auditory recognition.
Okay, so help me understand that. When I try to quickly produce the sound of a reduced phrase like sort of becoming sorta, my mouth learns the physical sensation of making that sound. How does that physical action then improve my ability to understand it when I hear someone else say it?
It improves prediction and anticipation. The brain loves efficiency, right? It's always trying to anticipate what comes next based on rhythm and structure. If your mouth physically knows how to flow from the S sound into the reduction of, your ear becomes instantly calibrated to recognize that flow when someone else produces it.
Oh, okay. So you move from processing sound after you hear it, which is reactive,
to anticipating the sound before it's even finished, which is predictive listening. It's a huge leap.
This sounds absolutely essential for fluency because it integrates all the skills. If you master the repetition and transcript steps from tips 3 and 4, you know the rules on paper. Shadowing turns that theoretical knowledge into muscle memory.
That's a great analogy. It's the difference between knowing the rules of baseball and actually learning how to hit a fastball. You need the physical practice to achieve fluency.
I like the analogy in the source material too. It says shadowing helps your mouth and ears work together, like dance partners learning the same rhythm.
It's synchronization. It completely bypasses the slower, analytical, grammar-focused part of your brain, and it targets the instinctual, fast processing area that you use in your native language.
For listeners who want to try this, how do they actually start? It sounds really challenging to do in real time. Do you use long clips or short clips?
You have to start small and slow. The key is microsegmentation. Take a very short clip, maybe 15 to 30 seconds long, and preferably use one you've already mastered with the repetition technique from tip 3.
So you already understand it well.
Right. Then listen to just the first 2 seconds. Pause the audio and try to mimic it exactly. You only increase the speed when you can capture the exact intonation, contour, and rhythm of those first 2 seconds.
So you're practicing in these tiny, tiny chunks, and you're focusing only on mimicking the acoustic properties, the music, not the meaning.
Exactly. Focus on the melody of the speech, not the translation. Then gradually you increase the segment length. You move to 3 seconds, then 5 seconds, and eventually you're trying to stay right on the heels of the speaker for the whole 30-second clip.
It sounds like it demands a lot of concentration.
It does, but it yields rapid results in reducing that feeling that English is too fast. It literally speeds up your internal processing speed.
That fully connects the listening and speaking components. So now let's move to our final practical tip, which is less about the method and more about, well, managing yourself.
After talking about repetition, transcripts, and shadowing, which are all pretty intensive activities, we have to talk about sustainability. And tip 6 is critical. Mix fun with practice.
Right, because if a learner diligently does all this hard work, but the content they're using is just dull, the whole system is going to fail because of burnout.
The source is very direct about this. It says, if you only study boring materials, your brain will run away.
I think we can all relate to that.
We can. Motivation is a finite resource, and these rigorous study methods, they deplete it quickly. We need to have an enjoyment factor to continuously replenish that motivation reservoir.
So consistency, which we've already established, is what wins the long game. It has to be driven by inherent enjoyment. What you find compelling is what you will stick with.
Absolutely. If the material is engaging, you're just less likely to see the repetition or the shadowing as a chore. If a student is passionate about, say, space exploration, shadowing an interview with an astronaut, even if it's technically difficult, is way more sustainable than shadowing a boring lecture on economics.
Enjoyment reduces the perceived effort of the work.
That's it, exactly.
So what are some specific enjoyable materials that tend to work well with these methods?
Our sources list several really good, flexible options. Compelling stories, simple interviews on topics you're actually interested in, short, digestible videos that are visually engaging, and English songs with clear lyrics.
Let's focus on songs for a second. That's a high engagement, high repetition format. How do songs specifically support this methodology?
Music is fantastic for this. First, it naturally reinforces rhythm, which is the foundational element of shadowing. Second, songs often have repeating choruses, which is just built-in repetition from tip 3.
You don't even have to try.
You don't. And the emotional connection you have to the music helps lock the vocabulary and the acoustic patterns into your long-term memory far more effectively than reading some plain text transcript ever could.
Plus, it can be low-stakes background material, like in tip 2.
Exactly. It naturally fits into that sponge analogy while you're on your commute or at the gym.
So the ultimate win here is recognizing that motivation and methodology are completely codependent. You can have the perfect plan, but if you don't inject content that keeps your brain engaged and wanting more, you will burn out long before you see that major skill shift.
We want learning to feel like you're satisfying your curiosity, not like you're just discharging a duty. If you can make the act of training, the repetition, the transcription, the shadowing a side effect of consuming genuinely interesting content, you've won the battle for consistency.
And consistency, fueled by enjoyment, is the guarantee of future mastery.
That's the formula.
Okay, we've covered the entire practical framework. We've established success, massive exposure, deep repetition, transcript analysis, vocal mirroring, and maintaining engagement. Now we can enter our final segment, which addresses the single most important ingredient required for all of this to work.
Time and patience.
We have asked the listener to do a lot of repetitive, highly detailed work here. If they're putting in this effort, shadowing these clips, listening 5 times, soaking up background audio, they need to know what progress actually looks like.
Right. They need to know the work is paying off.
And tip number 7 is maybe the most difficult one to accept. The source says improvement happens slowly and then suddenly. This is the patience paradox.
This is such a crucial piece of psychological scaffolding. If learners expect linear growth, that 10 hours of work equals a 10% improvement in listening skill, they will absolutely quit when they hit the inevitable plateau.
And there's always a plateau.
Always. The reality of skill acquisition, especially a linguistic auditory skill, is nonlinear. The brain needs to accumulate a massive amount of data before it reorganizes all of that data into what we call fluency.
So why is that accumulation process so invisible? Why do learners feel like nothing is happening for weeks or even months at a time?
Because the work is happening at a subconscious level. The brain is accumulating thousands of these subtle data points. Which vowels get reduced, which consonants get dropped or assimilated, the precise timing relationships between words. These are incremental shifts in the neural architecture.
It's like building the base of a skyscraper.
That's a great analogy. You're digging deep and you're laying the foundation, but you don't actually see the building rise above the ground for a very long time.
So the learner is doing all this hard, deep work, the digging and the foundation laying, but their conscious mind hasn't registered a visible change yet. And that leads to frustration and that feeling of stagnation.
Exactly. When you're repeating the same clip for the 5th time, you might feel bored, but your subconscious is busy cataloging all that sound data, stabilizing the neural pathways we talked about in tip 3. That feeling of stagnation, that plateau, is often the necessary phase of deep, silent processing. Your brain is just gathering enough statistical evidence on the acoustic structure of English.
And then one day, the dam breaks. The sources call this the click moment. What does that click feel like, and why does it seem to happen so suddenly?
The click moment is the point when all that subconscious processing finally reaches a critical mass. The brain basically says, okay, I have enough data now to create a robust, generalized pattern. The improvement feels sudden because your cognitive load just drops like off a cliff.
Let's detail some of the specific signs of progress that signal this click is happening. What should a learner be watching for?
The signs are so satisfying because they represent real-world competence. You might be watching a TV show you've seen before, and suddenly a sentence that was blurry last week now sounds perfectly clear, almost effortless.
You realize you understood the whole thing without translating it in your head first.
Yes. Or a casual conversation with a native speaker that used to feel terrifying. Suddenly just feels less scary because the sound is segmenting itself automatically for you. The ultimate realization is this shift from thinking I should be improving to realizing, wait a minute, I am improving.
And that reduction in cognitive load, not having to mentally translate the sound into written text and then into meaning, that is the goal. That's automaticity.
That is the definition of fluency in listening. It's a liberation from effort. The brain transitions from effortful analysis to automatic pattern recognition.
And it is the direct, inevitable reward for pushing through that silent, frustrating phase of accumulation.
It is. The learner has to realize that every minute they spent listening passively, every clumsy attempt at shadowing, all of it contributes to the magnitude of that eventual click.
So the final instruction to you, the listener, is really one of profound psychological resilience. You have to trust the process. Stay calm, stay curious, and just keep listening. You have to accept the non-linear path.
The most dangerous time for a language learner is during that plateau, right before the click. If you quit during that slow phase, all of that foundational work is wasted. You have to shift your focus from the outcome fluency to the consistent daily effort, the process.
If the process is right.
If the process is right, if you're using repetition, shadowing, enjoyable content, the click is not a matter of luck. It's an inevitability.
That's a powerful lesson that really applies way beyond just language learning. Work done slowly and patiently is never wasted. We've just completed our deep dive into English listening mastery, moving from the frustration of what feels like blurry noise to a structured 7-step framework designed for auditory success.
We covered those crucial foundational steps, setting yourself up for success with content that's actually manageable for you. That's tip 1.
And then saturating your environment to let your brain act like a sponge. That was tip 2.
We then dove into the heavy lifting of deep training, the incredible power of repeating the same material to really consolidate those neural pathways. That was tip 3.
And using transcripts to explicitly bridge the gap between sound and text to identify all those tricky weak forms. That was tip 4.
Finally, we integrated active production through shadowing, forcing the mouth and the ears to work together like synchronized dance partners. That was tip 5.
And we made sure all of that rigorous training was sustainable by anchoring it in content that brought you joy and kept you consistent. Tip 6.
And most importantly, we armed you with a critical mindset to endure the plateaus, understanding that improvement happens slowly and then suddenly, leading to that incredible, validating click moment from tip 7.
If you apply these 7 methods consistently, your ability to process fast, natural English is going to accelerate dramatically. You're building not just knowledge, but a high-speed processing skill.
Remember the core message from the experts. Just keep your ears open and trust that the work is compounding, even when it feels completely invisible.
And here is the final thought we want to leave you with, building on this profound nature of skill acquisition, that feeling of confusion you have today. It's really just raw data being fed into the system.
And that moment of sudden clarity, that click you're striving for, is often the result of your subconscious mind finally organizing tens of thousands of previously unrecognized acoustic patterns into usable predictive frameworks.
The work you do in the background, the times you felt frustrated, and yet you still chose to hit play on that audio clip one more time.
That is the work that delivers mastery. Never mistake the silence of deep learning for a lack of progress. The brain is always working. Your next major breakthrough might be just around the corner, waiting for one last repetition to trigger the full pattern recognition.
Stay curious, trust the process, and keep those ears open. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.